Peace, family, and welcome to the Draped Maniac podcast. I'm Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Draptomaniac in charge. And we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. There are a lot of so-called pro-black people on social media to whom I no longer listen to or follow. When I first started listening and watching, as with most things, there was a honeymoon period. And then, eventually, as with all relationships, in time we learn about the other person and may or may not like what it is that we're learning. Today I want to speak specifically about pro-black white supremacists.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Draptomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
Oh yes, they do exist. The saddest thing is that neither they nor their audience may recognize them as such. I think one of the things we must recognize as black people is that from the time we're born, we're taught that we're the worst, the bottom of the barrel, or worse, not even good enough to be in the barrel, even at the bottom. After years and decades of having the narrative pounded into us by television, social media, advertising, slanted news stories, the society at large, it would take an extremely strong mind to escape the brainwashing and not internalize the negative images of ourselves. We hear many commentators talk about the problems faced by black people and how often we fall short because of it. However, there is a vast difference between clinical observations, such as were made by Carter Woodson in his seminal work, The Miseducation of the Negro, and the bashing of black people under the guise of, I'm just keeping it a buck, or I just say what I'm saying because I'm trying to help our people and tell them the truth. That, for some, may be the actual motivation. However, when dealing with our people, it's important to keep in mind the condition of our people and why. First off, I'm not blind. I see bad, wrong, and outrageous behaviors from our people just as anyone else does. I see some of our women behaving quote-unquote ratchet. I see some of our men behaving quote-unquote like thugs. I hear and see abuse on both sides, by both sides. However, the more I learn about our people and the system in which we were indoctrinated, I comprehend the inescapable fact that everything, and I mean everything, that our people do has a context and happens within a bubble. Oddly enough, I totally lacked that insight until a couple years ago when my wife pointed out something to me that I never took into account or recognized. We were watching the series Underground, and love or hate the show, it was fodder for deep discussion. In particular, there was a character on the show named Ernestine. It shows scenes of her periodically having sex with the white enslaver. When we saw that, we got on the subject of bed wenches and bed bugs. In the course of the discussion, she introduced me to the concept that literally changed the way that I view our people as a whole. Now that I see it, I can't unsee it. Ask yourself this question and really think about it, because ultimately, this is the question that it boiled down to for us. How can you make independent choices within a closed system? As we talked about the character, we discussed the fact that on several occasions she was presented in the position of a seductress, even to the point that she seemed to have a degree of control over the enslaver, and he seemed to act in deference to her. Seemed. Later in the series, we saw that she had no control whatsoever, only the illusion of a degree of control that the enslaver was allowing her to have for his own purposes and for his own little games. The bigger point was that even if, for the sake of argument, this enslaved black woman was being some kind of seductress, it was all within a context. In other words, the question becomes, were this woman not enslaved and had 100% freedom and was born and raised among her own people, and under no threat of punishment or death, would she still be seeking to mock, seduce, or copulate with this pasty white man? Perhaps, but I would be willing to wager no. We, Angela and I, concluded that in every instance that she had relations with her white enslaver, any sexual contact she was having with him, even if she initiated it, was in effect a rape. Why? Context. Taken out of context, or with no context at all, she would be considered a bedwench and called every name in the book. But in context of the same time, her choice was to acquiesce to the enslaver or suffer harm to her children or loved ones. So, to any of our black men who speak of our black women ancestors or black women who speak of our black male ancestors in these terms, you may want to rethink your positions. Fast forward to today. We are surrounded and infiltrated with swirlers, traitors, quote-unquote thugs, and quote-unquote ratchet black women. But why? Why? Black people on all levels are negatively stereotyped and are at the bottom socially and especially economically. Black people as a whole are disproportionately at the bottom financially in relationships to our white counterparts or in relationship to our white counterparts. And we, in general, live in the poorest neighborhoods, receive the poorest education, have less disposable income, make up the largest percentage of the prison population, and so on. Is that because black people are inherently lazy, dumb, and are criminals by nature? Of course not. We recognize the entire thing to be ludicrous out of hand. All the things I just listed about our people are facts about our condition in this country and worldwide, and are used by those who hate us to say that it's true that we are lazy, dumb, and inherently criminals. But that thought process only holds up if it's taken without any context at all. What does context do? Context tells the whole story, not just some cherry-picked facts. It is one of the favorite games attorneys love to play. You're accused of murdering your husband. Tell the jury, did you shoot him in the heart? Just answer the question. Did you shoot him in the heart, yes or no? But he was yes or no. Yes, I shot him in the heart. See, obviously, she's a cold-blooded murderess. End of story. Her ass needs to go to prison right now, right? Let's give it some context. Yes, it is a fact that the woman shot her husband in the heart and killed him. However, the context is that she caught him about to rape their 7-year-old daughter. When she tried to stop him, he beat her up and threw her down the stairs and went back to finish what he started. She came to quickly and staggered over to the closet where they kept their gun, and she got it. She then went back up the stairs in time to stop her husband, who was now ripping off the clothes off of the daughter. He turns around in time to pull a knife out of his pocket that he was going to use on her and no doubt their daughter after he was done. And he lunged at his wife, who pulled the trigger and shot him in the heart, killing him. Does her ass still need to go to prison? I don't think so. If anything, she should be given a medal. The point being that out of context, or with no context at all, she would be looked at as just a woman who murdered her husband, and then the speculation can start from there, that she was just an angry black woman, quote unquote, or that her husband was the salt of the earth, and that ratchet bitch killed him. I speak of separating from this system. One part of separating is understanding that not only is this system inhospitable for our people, but that it is extremely toxic to us. It poisons us as individuals within our own minds and poisons us against our own people to the point we're unwilling to run any kind of slack to those who are not behaving as we think they should. And at the end of the day, who are we to harshly judge another of our people outside of our own individual flaws and shortcomings? But that's a discussion for another day. But also that we view ourselves as to some degree at the bottom and of a people who are the worst and the lowest on earth. which was done through non-stop programming and propaganda. We've been so negatively programmed that it seems we don't even know when we're being insulted, especially by our own. That's why black men and women can stand in pulpits and behind podiums, on street corners, and at family gatherings, and yes, on social media, and say the most horrendous and degrading things about black people imaginable, and we cheer for it, and we nod in approval and yell to them, preach it, from the amen corner, while not realizing that it's us they're insulting. Often we do not consider it us they're talking about. We're saying amen because they're talking about them, some other black people, not us. Because I'm not ratchet, I'm not a coon, I'm not illiterate, I'm not a thug, and so on. But let me clue you into something. And if you're honest, you're going to admit this is right because practically all of us have seen it. You know what the difference is between you and a coon? Do you know what the difference is between you and a nigger? Do you know what the difference is between you and whatever derogatory term there is? As long as you're supporting me, and I'm not talking about me personally, I'm talking about like the people who are like spouting this stuff. As long as you're supporting me and agreeing with me and you're on my side and you're one of my moderators, subscribers, and donors, you're one of the good ones. But start calling me out on my BS and get into a beef with me. And now that same person, you, who is still the same person you always were, except that you no longer agree with me, you're all messed up and you are all the things that I just named before. When listening to black commentators, one of the clues is to listen closely to how many times the statement begins with, the problem with black people is, or we've got all these Negroes here who, or these broke ass niggas be saying, or these ratchet ass hoes be like, or these coons be. Listen closely and you'll realize that the speaker, even though claiming that they're pro-black, or like a lot of frauds out there, say outright that they are not pro-black, but use pro-black rhetoric and talking points in order to gain support from the pro-black community and draw money from same, or take responsibility for their actions when they're undeniably doing anti-pro-black behaviors. Just listen closely. Is this a person who is truly for black people? Listen closely. Are you listening to someone who uses certain words and then talks to you condescendingly as if they assume that a large part of the audience doesn't understand what the word means because they're semi-illiterate? Is the commentator or writer a little bit too comfortable using the N-word, especially when they're in a beef with another black person, and they refer to the person they're at odds with as a nigger so many times and with such ease that you begin thinking that that's the actual name of the person they're addressing? Do they regularly use the terms of colonizers, enslavers, and oppressors in reference to our own people? Or here's the biggest test for anyone who would care to do it. Create a transcript of some of the commenters' comments, just written words on paper, and then let other pro-black people read them without telling them the source of it or who said it. And I guarantee you many times, if a black person was to just read the raw words on paper, they would tell you the quotes came from a staunch white supremacist. At some point, we have got to give context to what has happened to and shapes our people, all of our people, and start handling our own differently. I am in no way saying we should just give all manner of foolishness a pass. I am saying that we have got to understand that there's a reason our people do the things that we do and behave the way that we behave and make the choices that we make. Outside of the construct of this system of white supremacy, we would be different people. Yes, there will still be those among us who would be lawbreakers based upon our laws, or who would exhibit bad and in some cases horrible behaviors and need to be dealt with, in some cases severely. But that is a scenario for a perfect world. By a perfect world, I mean a world in a society where we are removed from this construct, outside of a system where we are born basically without a chance to know anything different. It is inherently unfair of us to judge our brothers and sisters so harshly. If we were separate and to ourselves, and dare I say it, several generations removed from the system which has poisoned the soul, psyche, and epigenetic memory of our people, then and only then will we be able to fairly judge our own people based upon our actions and the choices that we make. I'm not saying I have it all figured out, or that I don't become enraged by our people who behave badly, or who have turned coat, or who are charlatans and frauds. There's one in particular who anyone who knows me knows that I'm like a dog with a bone with this person. I can't stand them. So everything I've said, I'm also directing toward myself. Because I'm still not there yet. I still don't have it all figured out yet. But because of what I have learned and what I'm learning, as far as I'm concerned, every time we focus our anger or hatred at our own people, we are in effect giving the people who are responsible for our condition a pass. And I'm talking about oppressors, colonizers, and the system of white supremacy. They flooded our neighborhoods with drug, alcohols, and weapons, and dog us out for getting high, drunk, and killing each other. They cut us off from any form of economic advancement and tell everyone that we're lazy. They underfund our schools, and even when it is funded and things are taught, it's propaganda and miseducation. And they say we're uneducated. They relegate us to areas with food deserts and tell everyone that we're overweight and unhealthy because we choose not to eat well. They lock us up in prisons for little or nothing and say that the prisons are filled with our people because we are inherently prone to criminal behavior. They, and I'm talking about white people, project all their shortcomings onto our people. In other words, listen closely to them. Everything, and I mean everything 100% that is negative that they say about our people actually pertains to them. And I mean everything, no exceptions. If you don't believe it, just start listening to them closely, and one by one, anytime you hear them say something negative about black people, check their past and present history, and you'll realize it actually pertains to them. They are talking about themselves. Even down to the fact that they live in paralyzing fear that if our people ever got out from under their boot, we would riot and take revenge on them. When historically it is proven time after time that when black people are basically left alone to go our way, we just seek to build and live in peace. They have this fear because they know that if the situation was reversed and they were the ones who were oppressed, raped, dogged out, cheated, and so on throughout their history for centuries in this country, that if the situation was reversed and they were finally freed, they would never let it go. And there would be a bloodbath like nothing the world has ever seen. Want proof? Look at Haiti. It wasn't even a case of Haitians even doing anything to them except fighting to not be colonized and enslaved and to keep their land. So it wasn't even the same situation, but the colonizers were defeated and they never let it go to this day and have been a plague to that country because that is their nature, not ours. I digress. We must start thinking more deeply about the position of our people and what we can do to bring healing to us as a people, as a group. Separation is the start. But even before we begin that, we can start to look at our brothers and sisters in a different way. Again, that doesn't mean that we give wrong behavior a pass, just that perhaps we can at least start to temper our judgment with the understanding that as wrong as they may be, as much as they may anger us, as much as we may want to quote-unquote cancel them, and maybe we should sometimes, but just as we understand that we're doing that, we must understand that there is an entire system that brought that person to that past, just as it has with us all. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Drapetomaniac Podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, the head Drapetomaniac in charge, wishing you health and strength and giving love and honor to you and yours. And until next Friday at this same time, as always, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapetomaniac Podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOEAIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.